I booked the Airbnb because I wanted privacy. I was traveling for a work conference, and after weeks of tight deadlines and constant meetings, the idea of a quiet, secluded space sounded like heaven. The listing promised complete privacy, with no interaction required from the host, just a clean, comfortable space where I could rest and focus. When I pulled into the driveway, the guest house was tucked away behind the main house, almost hidden by the tall hedges and trees. It looked charming, exactly like the pictures on the listing. Greg, the host, greeted me at the door. He seemed nice enough, middle-aged with a warm smile, but there was something off about the way he hovered around. He gave me a brief tour of the property, pointing out all the amenities and going over the house rules. I didn't think much of it at first. Some people just like to talk. As he left, he reminded me to reach out if I needed anything, but I felt a little uncomfortable when he didn't immediately walk away. He lingered a moment longer than seemed natural. That evening, as I was settling in, I noticed Greg walking past the guest house several times. It was dark outside, and it wasn't unusual for him to walk around his own yard, but the way he would pause near my window and glance inside made me uneasy. I brushed it off at first. Maybe he was just checking on the plants or whatever. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I pulled the blinds shut and tried to relax. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on the door. Greg stood there with a pair of gardening shears. "Just need to trim some bushes near the guest house," he said. I thought it was odd because the bushes didn't look overgrown at all, but I didn't question it. Greg spent nearly an hour trimming, edging closer and closer to the windows as he worked. Every time I glanced over, he seemed to be watching me. The way he looked at me through the glass, it wasn't subtle. I tried to ignore it. I wasn't there for drama, just a little peace and quiet. But that afternoon, I noticed something strange. As I was unpacking my suitcase, I felt a sudden chill, like someone was standing just outside. I checked the windows, but there was no one there. Still, the air felt heavier somehow, and the discomfort was growing. That night, I was lying on the couch when I noticed something small in the corner of the ceiling. A tiny black dot, almost invisible at first, but unmistakable once I focused on it. It was a camera. It was positioned perfectly to capture both the couch and a portion of the bedroom. My blood ran cold. I searched the entire guest house. In the bathroom, I found another camera, this one hidden inside the vent above the shower. In the bedroom, there was a third one disguised as a smoke detector. Panic surged through me. I felt trapped. I immediately called Greg, demanding an explanation. He answered, but his tone was off. He laughed nervously at first, trying to brush it off, but then his tone shifted. "I don't know what you're accusing me of, but I assure you, you're wrong," he said, his voice cold. The denial only made me more certain that I wasn't imagining things. I told him I was leaving first thing in the morning, but Greg began to beg me to stay. "Please," he said, "let me fix this. I'll refund your stay. Just stay one more night." His voice was pleading, but I knew I couldn't stay. I locked the bedroom door that night, but I couldn't sleep. Every little noise made my heart race. Every creak, every whisper of wind outside. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a door opening. My heart stopped. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the living room. I held my breath, trying to be as quiet as possible. My mind raced. Was it Greg? Had he come back? I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed 911. I whispered into the phone, telling the dispatcher what was happening without making a sound. My body was frozen, but my eyes darted to the door as I heard the soft creak of footsteps moving closer. Then I heard Greg's voice. "It's just me," he said, his words slurring slightly. "I just wanted to talk." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just outside the door, he had a key. I heard the unmistakable sound of it turning in the lock. Before I could react, I heard sirens in the distance. The police arrived shortly after. They found Greg inside the guest house, holding a spare key. He claimed he was just there to check on me, but the officers didn't believe him. They searched the main house and discovered more cameras, as well as footage of previous guests, footage he had recorded without their knowledge. Apparently, this wasn't the first time someone had complained about his behavior, but nothing had been done. It's been months since that night, and I still have trouble shaking the feeling of being watched. Every time I stay somewhere new, I find myself checking Every corner, every vent, every smoke detector for hidden cameras. I'll never feel comfortable booking a private Airbnb again. Ryan and I had been planning our weekend getaway for months. After weeks of stressful deadlines and nonstop studying, we both desperately needed a break. We found an Airbnb listing that looked perfect, a quiet, secluded house in a peaceful town, just what we needed to recharge. The photos made it seem like a cozy retreat, the kind of place you could escape to for some privacy and relaxation. The host, Sarah, was friendly and promised the place would be all ours for the weekend. We arrived on Friday evening, eager to unwind. The house was charming, an old two-story home with a neat front yard and a few trees swaying gently in the wind. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet. It felt like we were the only ones there. When Sarah greeted us at the door, she made small talk and explained the house's quirks. The floors creaked a little, and the plumbing was outdated, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She made sure we knew where the Wi-Fi was and told us to feel free to make ourselves at home. We unpacked our bags and grabbed a couple of beers to enjoy on the porch. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed. We spent the evening chatting, but as the night wore on, I began to feel a strange unease. At first, I thought it was just the unfamiliar setting, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more I felt like I was being watched. It started with the sound of footsteps from upstairs. Soft, deliberate steps. At first, I thought it was just the old house settling, but then I heard it again and again. "Do you hear that?" I asked Ryan, trying to keep my voice steady. He paused, looking uncomfortable. "It's probably nothing, just an old house." But something didn't sit right with me. We both heard it, footsteps coming from above us, slow but constant. We exchanged uneasy glances and I could see the worry in Ryan's eyes. "What if there's someone else here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he got up and walked toward the stairs. "I'm going to check it out," he said. I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. We reached the second floor, but the hallway was empty. No sign of Sarah and no sign of anyone else. We stood there for a moment, listening. The house was still, too still. Then we heard it again. The footsteps, louder now, almost as if they were coming closer. "Who's upstairs?" I called out, trying to mask the fear in my voice. There was no answer. Ryan and I exchanged a look and we decided to go downstairs and speak to Sarah. But when we knocked on her door, there was no response. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was wrong. That's when we noticed the coffee mug on the front porch. It was sitting on the ground, half full, the dark liquid inside long cold. It wasn't there when we arrived. "That wasn't here before, was it?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. I shook my head. "No, it wasn't." "That's weird." We both stood there for a moment, feeling more and more uneasy. It didn't take long for us to start noticing other oddities. A blanket had been folded neatly on the couch, but neither of us had put it there. There were faint sounds coming from upstairs again, scratching, as if something was moving around in the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in the house. Ryan didn't seem convinced at first, but after a few more unsettling noises, he began to share my concern. We went back upstairs and started checking the rooms, but nothing seemed out of place. That's when we came across a door at the end of the hallway. It was small and unmarked, something I hadn't noticed before. "What's that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ryan looked at me, his eyes wide. "I don't know. Let's just leave it." But curiosity got the better of me. I approached the door and tried the handle. It was locked. I knocked gently, waiting for a response, but nothing came. "We should leave," Ryan insisted. "This doesn't feel right." But something inside me told me that we needed to know what was behind that door. I felt an inexplicable pull to open it. I grabbed the door handle and twisted it. To my surprise, it opened. The stairs creaked under my weight as I ascended into the attic. The air grew stale and the smell of dust hit me immediately. As I looked around, I was struck by how cramped the space was. Old furniture, scattered boxes, and piles of clothes. But it was what I found in the corner that made my stomach drop. A coffee mug. The same one I'd seen on the porch. I froze, my mind racing. It couldn't be. "Ryan, get up here," I whispered urgently. When he saw the mug, his face drained of color. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. This wasn't just an old house, there was something sinister going on. The attic was small, cramped, and cluttered with old furniture. But it wasn't just the mess that unsettled me, it was the presence. The feeling that someone had been living here. There was a mattress shoved in the corner, an old jacket thrown over it, and food wrappers scattered across the floor. But the worst part? The coffee mug. It was the same one from the porch. "Someone's been here," Ryan said, his voice shaking. I wanted to leave, but something kept me rooted to the spot. That's when I heard it. The sound of footsteps coming from below us. They were unmistakable, slow, deliberate, getting closer. "Get out of here now," Ryan said, his voice tight with fear. We turned and ran for the stairs, but just as we reached the bottom, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. We were trapped. I could hear the footsteps above us, but it was the voice that made my blood run cold. "You weren't supposed to find this." It wasn't Sarah's voice. It wasn't anyone we knew. I don't know how we managed to escape, but we did. We ran out of the house and never looked back. When the police arrived, they discovered that Sarah had been renting out the attic to someone in secret. She'd lied about the house being empty. I still don't know who was living in the attic, but I can't shake the feeling that we were never meant to find out. The next time I book an Airbnb, I'll be a lot more cautious. Airbnb stays are usually smooth and uneventful. At least they always had been for me. I'm not one to splurge on hotels when I'm traveling, so I've stayed in my fair share of Airbnbs, some great, some just okay. But this time, it was different. It's an experience I'll never forget, and not in a good way. I was in town for a weekend conference and found a small, affordable Airbnb not too far from the venue. The listing seemed perfect. A cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood with everything I'd need for a short stay. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, praising the host, Lauren, for her attentiveness and the apartment for being spotless and well kept. It felt like a safe bet. I arrived late on a Friday evening, exhausted from the long drive. The apartment building was unassuming, nestled in a row of similar-looking buildings on a dimly lit street. Lauren had messaged me earlier in the day with detailed check-in instructions. She'd left the key in a lockbox outside the building and assured me it would be an easy process. When I got there, I found the lockbox right where she said it would be. I punched in the code and the small metal door clicked open. Inside was a single brass key, and I took it out, grateful for the simple process. The building was quiet as I stepped inside and found my way to the apartment on the second floor. The key slid into the lock easily, but when I turned it, the door didn't budge. Confused, I tried again, jiggling the key and applying more pressure, but it still wouldn't open. I checked the message Lauren had sent, wondering if I'd misunderstood something, but I hadn't. It was the right apartment number, the right key, and the right lockbox. I tried a few more times before giving up and messaging Lauren. "Hey, I think there's an issue with the key. It's not opening the door," I typed. I waited for her response, leaning against the wall in the empty hallway. It was eerily quiet, no sounds of neighbors, no faint music, nothing. Just silence. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Are you sure you're at the right door? It should work," she replied. I double-checked the number on the door. "Yes, I'm sure," I wrote back. There was a pause before she responded. "I'll double-check with the cleaner. They were the last ones there. Hang tight." It was already late, and I was starting to feel the strain of the long day. I sat down on my suitcase, scrolling aimlessly on my phone while I waited. The hallway light above me flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the floor. After about 10 minutes, Lauren sent another message. "I just spoke to the cleaner. They said they left the correct key in the lockbox, but I'll come by to sort this out. Give me 20 minutes. I sighed, frustrated but grateful she was willing to help. I decided to wait outside by my car. It felt less unsettling than the dead silent hallway. As I stepped out onto the street, I heard the faint sound of a door closing somewhere in the building. It was strange because I hadn't heard anyone else moving around before. I glanced back at the windows of the second floor, half expecting to see someone looking out, but there was nothing. Just darkness. Lauren arrived quicker than I expected. She pulled up in a small sedan, got out, and greeted me with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about this," she said, holding up a set of keys. We went back inside, and she tried the key I'd been using. It didn't work for her either. "That's weird," she muttered, pulling out another key from her set. This one worked, and the door swung open. I followed her inside, and the apartment was exactly as advertised: clean, cozy, and inviting. She apologized again, explaining that there must have been some mix-up with the cleaner. I thanked her, and she left, promising to sort out the key issue in the morning. After unpacking a few things, I settled onto the couch, relieved to finally relax. But as I sat there, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a nagging feeling that I couldn't shake. That's when I noticed the closet door in the hallway. It was slightly ajar. I didn't remember it being open when we first walked in, but I hadn't been paying close attention. Curious, I walked over and pulled it open. Inside were some cleaning supplies, a broom, a mop, and a backpack. That was odd. Lauren hadn't mentioned anything about personal belongings being left behind. I unzipped the backpack and my stomach tightened. Inside were clothes, men's clothes. A hoodie, a pair of jeans, and some socks all neatly folded. There was also a phone charger and a half-empty water bottle. A cold realization washed over me. Someone had been staying here. Recently. I quickly checked the rest of the apartment. The bedroom was empty, but the bed looked like it had been slept in, the sheets slightly rumpled. The bathroom was clean but humid, as if someone had taken a shower not long ago. My heart raced as I locked the door and double-checked it. I messaged Lauren immediately. "Did someone else stay here recently?" Her response came almost instantly. "No, why?" I told her about the backpack and the state of the apartment. Her reply made my blood run cold. "That's not possible. The cleaner said no one's been there since they prepped it for you." I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound, every creak made my skin crawl. By morning, I packed up and left, not even bothering to wait for her explanation. Whatever had happened in that apartment, I wasn't going to stick around to find out.